I apologise in advance to Times Radio listeners. I said that J.D. Vance was a piece of shit. And I think that will be the impression of the rest of the world.
Well, we are covering the extraordinary scenes coming out of the White House this afternoon. Historic clash. It wasn't even a press conference because we have just been told that press conference that was planned between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky has been cancelled. Donald Trump has effectively shown Volodymyr Zelensky the door. So it became very, very heated in that exchange. We're going to just recap what has happened in the last hour in some of the most astonishing moments that I've ever witnessed between two world leaders. Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social that President Zelensky isn't ready for peace and can come back when he is. He's also accused him of disrespecting the US in the cherished Oval Office. Let's have a reminder of how the dramatic meeting unfolded over an hour ago. The exchange began to get heated when Volodymyr Zelensky interjected whilst the vice president was speaking.
I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014 and 2014.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
that's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped.
From there, it only got more uncomfortable.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
And this after President Zelensky warned of the war coming to the West.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influenced.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Well, let's continue discussing those unprecedented scenes coming from the White House now with Tim Marshall, foreign affairs expert and author of Prisoners of Geography, Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO, and Alexander Mereshko, an MP in Volodymyr Zelensky's party and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Ukrainian Parliament. Good evening to all three of you. Alexander, let me start with you. When you were watching that encounter, what did you think?
Well, it was unusual, to put it very mildly. I couldn't believe my ears, but, you know, the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy teaches us don't panic. So I hope that behind the closed doors, the situation will be more calm and more constructive.
Well, except Donald Trump has cancelled the press conference and effectively shown Volodymyr Zelensky the door.
Well, again, I'm proud of my president that he stands up he is able to defend our values and our country because, right now he's the voice of defiant country fighting against Russian aggression for the third year. And we're entering the fourth year of brutal war. But, he's the voice of all Ukrainians. And I'm proud that he has guts to defend us, even in front of the most powerful person on earth, which is President Trump right now.
And I think we're just about to see him leaving the White House now. Yes, he has left the White House. He's got into a car. Volodymyr Zelensky has left without doing that promised press conference. That was really a very short encounter after that testy exchange that has, I think it's fair to say, shocked the world. Alexander, just before I bring in our other guests, is there an agenda here that Donald Trump and his team, they want to get Zelensky out and put someone more amenable in place? Is that what's at stake here?
No, absolutely not, because the recent statements made by President Trump with regard to our president had only this effect. They boosted the popularity of our president in Ukraine, because for us, he's a symbol of our resistance. And it had no effect because, I don't see any reason to remove our president from power as a commander-in-chief, as a very popular president, as a symbol of our hope and resistance.
Jim Townsend, let me bring in you here, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO. Jim, it was an extraordinary display. It looked like the two powerful men in the room hectoring and bullying the junior. What did you make of it?
Well, it was like a barroom brawl. I just, it was brutal, quite brutal. It was shocking, but I think it was brutal in the sense that for all the public to see, we saw these two heads of state battling each other with fists, verbal fists, and we're not used to seeing that. One thing that Trump said was, I think the American people, the public should see this. And that's why I'm letting this photographic opportunity go on so that everyone can see this. And and in a lot of ways, this with theater, too. He was raising his voice and he was J.D. Vance piling on this wrestling match, this scrum. Some of it was theater for the public to see how tough they are.
Well, is that the point, that it was a calculated, premeditated sort of ambush by the president and his deputy of the Ukrainian president?
Well, it certainly felt like it, didn't it? I'm going to watch it again with that in mind. But they were ready. They were ready for this. J.D. Vance, particularly. I mean, usually the vice president sits there and doesn't jump in and pile on the way J.D. Vance did, and in a rude way, frankly. Zelensky rose to the bait.
Should he not have done?
Excuse me?
Should he not have risen to the bait?
Yeah, I think everyone's different. I would not have risen to the bait because it just makes it worse.
But then like your country isn't losing its people, every night in danger.
Well, I think there's a difference between rising to the bait and beginning a spectacle and defending yourself. And I think he was trying to defend himself. But with Donald Trump, I think you have to be it's like handling a bomb. You got to be very careful.
But some might say, why should you deal with him like that? Why should people do what Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron did? The bonhomie, the backslapping, and the kind of, they don't really think that, do they?
Well, it's an important point. And I think what I see here in Washington, talking to many Europeans coming through, they ask, how do we deal with Trump? And they all want to game the plan. You have a game plan for dealing with him. And I think Macron and Keir Starmer had their approach. I think Zelensky went in there, and I think, like you said, he's under pressure. So he did engage in a debate. But I think with Donald Trump, it's like wrestling with pigs. The pigs love it and you just get dirty.
That's such a metaphor. Let me bring in Tim Marshall now, foreign affairs expert, author of Prisoners of Geography. Tim, where on earth does this leave America, Ukraine, Europe, the UK, the world?
I think it leaves America's reputation significantly lowered. And I say that as a supporter of the United States. I say that as someone who believes that President Trump has got very many valid points when he criticizes the Europeans. I wrote a big essay in the Sunday Times this weekend saying just that, we have been backsliders, we have been weak, we haven't stood up for ourselves. But this was a premeditated, gangster-like ambush. It was low blows, it was clearly deliberate. The scene was set even before that, the bits you've played, Kathy. I think it was one of the tame journalists that they've got into the White House now who said to Zelensky, "Hey, why are you wearing that? Have you even got a suit?" They were goading him. And then in comes JD Vance, who knows better than to take control when the big man's in the room. So clearly he knows what he's doing. Absolutely insults the president of Ukraine. I believe he had to stand up for himself. I don't think Zelensky could have gone home being utterly humiliated. I don't think he was. I don't think he would survive as a political leader if he had not stood up for himself, because he is the representative of Ukraine.
But I
just thought it was disgusting.
Is that the agenda, that the White House wants to get him out? And do you think that might work? I mean, how do you think things will shape up in terms of the EU, for example? Well, I mean, I've got a lot of people messaging in saying Keir Starmer now needs to cancel that state visit.
Well, he won't, because that's in Britain's national interest. But I go back to this idea of an ambush, and also what Jim just said. I wrote the words down when I heard Trump say them. I think it's very important for the American people to see what's going on. That's why I kept this going for so long. And then he ended the press conference, "This is going to be great television." It was absolutely deliberate, designed to humiliate Zelensky, because you could either humiliate him without him pushing back, in which case he's completely emasculated, and I think his term in office would come to an end fairly soon, or he stands up for himself, in which case they get to bully him even more. The Macron-Starmer love-in, I think, will help France and Britain. Sorry, you asked me where it goes from here. I'm at a bit of a loss. I mean, and I thought it was interesting when you just announced that the press conferences have been cancelled, because it would have gone on again then. And look how short the meeting was. I mean, was it an hour? I think
roundabout.
I think Starmer had a couple of hours. They clearly have not agreed, and he's left. And they're going to get a deal imposed upon them, which is going to be very hard for them to accept. I think the chancelleries of Europe tonight will, like Oksana Marakova, who, if you see the footage, which you have, Kathy, you'll see a woman in the front row. She's got her head in her hands and she's almost crying. That's the Ukrainian ambassador to America. She realizes what's going on in front of her.
Well, Alexander Mereshko, MP in Volodymyr Zelensky's party, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've got to ask you, is Donald Trump a Russian asset?
I hope not. I hope not. But the truth is that we don't have any other American president. We have to deal with Mr. Trump as American president, and our fate dependent on the American military aid to Ukraine. We can survive due to American aid, and we're grateful for the fact that the United States has saved us several times. But, for us, Trump is both a challenge and opportunity, and we have no right to be pessimistic. We have to continue to deal with him, to persuade him, no matter how tough, how difficult it is, because he's our reality, objective reality. But luckily, we have France. We have Keir Starmer, who will come tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, and will also speak on behalf of Ukraine. We have our President Macron. We have other European leaders who will gather together, 10 of them at the summit. So we have France. We're not alone.
Very good to hear. Alexander Mereshko, thank you very much for joining us. I'll let you go. I'm sure you've got many other demands on your time now, but thank you very much for joining us on Times Radio. Tim Marshall, Foreign Affairs expert, author of The Prisoners of Geography, and Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO, remain with me. Jim Townsend, first, I mean, the US wanted to get its hands on Ukraine's minerals. That deal has not been signed. It was going to be a memorandum of understanding. It has not been signed, and Zelensky has now left the White House. Do you think, though, nevertheless, that Donald Trump will be very pleased with how this went? As Tim was saying, you know, this was made for television, and he'll think this was a job well done.
Well, I think Tim is right. You know, I'll sharpen my earlier response and say, yeah, it certainly had the earmarks of being a setup. And I think, frankly, I think Trump will come away and feel pretty good about this. I mean, yes, he wants the minerals. Yes, he wants the framework agreement signed. I think it eventually will be signed. But he loves good television, and he loves to throw red meat to his followers. And this is just a great example of that. I called it theater and earlier, and it is theater. It's theater for television. He's going to come out looking like a tough guy. Putin's going to love it. I bet Putin sends him a little note saying, "You look great out there." I mean, this is something where, you know, Trump is going to be gaining from this, even more than signing a minerals agreement that a lot of people probably aren't focused on.
Right.
The film is enough, and they'll love it.
I'd like to bring in also Adam Bolton, presenter of Sunday Morning on Times Radio. Good evening to you all. Thank you very much for staying with us. Adam, your response on Twitter was pithy. What did you make of what we've just seen?
Well, I said, and I think I'm allowed to say this, I apologise in advance to Times Radio listeners. I said that J.D. Vance was a piece of shit. And I think that will be the impression of the rest of the world. I saw your previous interviewee saying that this will play well in the United States. I think to the rest of the world, there will be shock and confirmation of their worst suspicions about the new administration. It's, you know, at the very least, you know, I've been in the Oval Office many times with visiting British prime ministers. They have never been treated like that by any of the previous. And indeed, they weren't. This is no way to treat the elected leader of a nation at war, and which the United States is supposed to still be in alliance with.
Adam, just briefly, there's a lot of people messaging in saying Keir Starmer should cancel that state visit in sympathy and solidarity with Volodymyr Zelensky. What do you think?
Well, I think he would be ill-advised to rush ahead with it, and I think that's going to be next year. Of course, you know, the UK, like France, is in this position where it wishes to maintain an alliance. I've always thought that perhaps the UK has gone a little bit too far in terms of trying to suck up and emulate Donald Trump. I mean, you know, it is quite remarkable that there is someone who is so, you know, puerile that he responds to flattery in that way. I think much more important, really, of what we've seen now is where it leaves the Ukraine conflict. I had that statement from Trump, you know, come back when you want peace. We had very clear statements from Zelensky that, you know, it wasn't peace at any price, that Ukraine would fight on if it had to. And I think probably the fallout of all of this is simply going to be that the US's voice is not going to be listened to in this process, and that it will be up to the Europeans to step up.
And Tim Marshall, let me bring you back in at this point, because the European leaders are meeting. Keir Starmer is hosting them with Volodymyr Zelensky. How on earth should they react to this now, do you think?
Well, I think it's proof that they need to make a choice that they don't want to make. I mean, I think the way ahead, if you think it's doable, is to placate this man whilst you try to build your defences, because you should be doing that anyway, and then you hang on for 4 years, still with an intact NATO. But it's this sort of behaviour that is going to make that even more difficult, and it will provide some impetus to this idea of the Europeans finally getting their act together. Adam mentioned Trump's comments, and I think it's worth passing what he said here, because I think we can read things into it. He said, Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage. I don't want that advantage. I want peace. And then this is the bit for me. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. And then, as Adam said, he can come back when he's ready for peace. The guy's out the door. As you said, he's been shown the door. He's been booted out of it. And that therefore gives the Europeans tomorrow some really difficult discussions, because if the Americans are not going to be dealing with the Ukrainians and they're going to try and impose this deal via the Russians, what are the Europeans going to do about it?
Yeah.
The chancellors of Europe are in shock tonight, and the phones will be buzzing.
Exactly. Well, we must end it there. But Tim Marshall, Jim Townsend, Adam Bolton, after, and frankly, unbelievable scenes coming from the White House. We'll see how that plays out over the weekend, how Europe responds. Thank you for listening.